those things are nothing to play around with. And a similar thing happened to him, split his head open really bad. And he said the next day that he was all right until I walked in the door, took a look at her, oh my God. She thought, oh God, Cactus Jack is about to faint. This has got to be really bad stuff, you know? It's got to be really bad. Let's take some questions here, but you get the theme. It's about making your stuff look different, making it look better in some ways, even if it means toning down the spectacular nature. No, don't get me wrong. Like, this is something that Ricochet has had to deal with this, is that he got labeled as a flyer, you know, and as a spot guy. And I knew he could do anything. Right? He could do anything. But when people booked him, they did it with the understanding that we want to see you fly. And it's hard to tell a story. It's hard. WWE has thankfully embraced independent wrestling, and I'll say, you know, it's really been to the betterment of their business. There was a time when they looked down on guys who came from the independent background. Like, I don't know how else to do it, you know. I guess you can get picked to go to the training center based on looking good and those type of things. But man, I would tell those guys, I would say, you try going out there without entrance music, or at least entrance music that people know or familiar with, without fans who are familiar with you, going out there in different atmospheres. Some are family atmospheres, some are adult, you know, more adult-oriented atmospheres. You try getting over every single night. Difficult thing to do, and it's a scary thing to do. And when you get there and you get to, you know, get a chance to be part of a bigger organization, you know, there are safeguards like your music. You know the music is going to get a pop. You know that signature moves are going to get a pop. But when you're on the independent scene, man, you got to find a way to, you know, to catch that audience, make them think about you while satisfying the people who booked you, because you do want to get booked again. There's a lot of talent out there, a lot of choices to be made, and you want to make everyone happy. Going back to what I said about, you know, siphoning through things that work for you, filtering through things that work for you and things that don't, and finding things that eventually can work in a way that you might not have thought of. I have a story about when I worked for AWA, and it was like going to be one of my big breaks. You know, I was Cactus Jack. This is early 1988. I'd been at it almost 3 years, and I was going to wrestle Ted Petty, the Cheetah Kid, who at that time was one of the best flyers. Later went on to be a brawler. You know, as
Rocco Rock.
Yeah, yep. Flyboy Rocco Rock. By the time he was really a great flyer. A little side note: he's the sole reason that Cactus Jack wore leopard print boots, because he got in a pair of Mexico that didn't fit him quite right. He sold them to me for $100. Somebody said, what does that have to do with a Cactus Jack character? I said, absolutely nothing, but I like the way they look. And years later, you know, I don't even think Stagecoach will make another pair of leopard print like those are Mick Foley's boots. But we were on first. And we also had a referee named Sal, and you guys might know Sal Parenti. He's a pain in the neck, you know, but he is a pain in the neck who got me booked on that show, and he wanted me to do everything I could. Every bump in my arsenal, and he was the only referee I've ever seen who tried to call a match for me. He's like, take the backdrop on the floor, do it. We eventually got to it, and Ted and I did a lot of stuff he probably shouldn't be doing in the first match. And Manny Fernandez came up to us, and he goes, people aren't paying to see you. It's not what you do in a first match. And I said, well, thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez, I appreciate that. I'm sorry, you know, I hurt the card anyway. And Ted Petty looked at him and said, you ever think that maybe the wrong guys are on first? And oh, that's a little stiff, you know. Like that's probably not the correct answer. So you're not kissing butt by respecting, you know, someone's opinion, even if you disagree with it. And you might find ways to come around and use what you learn here. Like I said, I could teach you the 5 moves I knew, you know, and go at it, you know. When people ask me how I feel about somebody wanting you doing one of my moves on a show, I love it, you know, honestly. Dean Ambrose using the double arm BDT, except doing it better than I do. That's great. If I could talk to Jay Briscoe, who does the elbow on the floor, I'd tell him it's the worst structural move in the history of pro wrestling. Don't do it, but thank you, you know. But I hope you'll take with you some of these ideas of taking your stuff, making it different, and that way making it better, whether it's move, whether it's promo, There are different types of guys who did promos, you know. I mean, I remember Bobby Duncombe, who was a seasoned veteran, right, and former NFL player, and he talked about cutting promos in front of a mirror. And Bobby wasn't a particularly good promo guy, but that was good advice. But I never did promos in front of a mirror. I had a way of taking what I saw in my head, you know, and try to make it come to life. That's what worked for me. If you talk about creative visualization to someone else, they might think you're crazy. And maybe for them, cutting promos in front of a mirror works better than just thinking about them until the wee hours of the morning. But I will tell you this, like, be ready. Becky Lynch asked me for promo advice a couple of years ago, and I said, Becky, above everything else, be ready. Be ready to say something meaningful anytime someone gives you the mic, because you never know what's going to happen. In my case, I've been labeled as a guy who couldn't talk because I was a guy at Cactus Jack, and I still had little traces of a Long Island accent. Not much, but a couple of telltale sounds, like ball, ball, we went through ball. And the thought was, especially when I became a babyface, dear God, Robert Fuller said, Draco, we can't have you talk. You know, turn yourself heel. People find out you're from New York. And Gary Young was my partner, and Gary had been around the business for 10, 12 years at that point. He was a good talker. And on that one morning in the Memphis studio, Gary was stumbling for words. And then Lance Russell said to me, he goes, how do you feel about that, Jack? And on one hand, I'm like, I know I'm not supposed to talk. But he's Lance freaking Russell, and he just handed me a microphone. And I had stuff in my head, you know, and I can't say I nailed it every time that I did a promo, but I nailed it that day. I went back and they were like, I guess we can forget about you not talking. And opened up a whole new world for me. So always be ready.